I'd rather create something that others criticise than create nothing and criticise others.
If you have high quality product behind the bar, it's like a weapon.
It's not about the figures, it's about who those figures are.
The Hospodpreneurs Podcast.
I'm going to drink this beer.
Yeah, let's crack them.
With James Henderson.
My guest today has performed nationally and internationally in bands like Tin Can Radio and Sleepy Tea, touring with artists like Emma Louise and Josh Pyke. He's received Triple J Unearthed Spotlight and national radio play. But when we met, he was behind the mic at Brisbane's live music venue, The Flying Cock. His ensemble, Birdman Randy and the Ivory Street Preachers, has played there every Saturday for the past 5 years. He's a singer, songwriter, multi-instrumentalist, and has recently started a boutique entertainment booking agency called Buttermint. It's a pleasure to host Tom Wearne. Hello and welcome to the show, Tom.
Thank you, James.
It's great to have you here today, mate. And you know that the first question I like to ask is, what's your crazy hospitality story?
My crazy hospitality story, and there's been a few, but maybe one that comes to mind, one that might be relevant to a hospo crowd, would be touring and playing in a band called Tin Can Radio. We were kind of young, up-and-coming indie go-getters trying to win over the hearts of Australia one room at a time. And we did a lot of touring, and on these tours we would notice this kind of consistent thing that would happen is that the metropolitan shows were fun, but the wild times always came from these kind of country or rural shows that between cities.
What do you mean wild? I think that's going to be the story.
Yeah, I guess. Like you'd play in King's Cross, and the kind of dead-eyed bartender would hand over 6 drink tickets, and there's 5 people in the band, and so you'd all be bleakly passing around the last beer, taking a sip and passing on to the next guy. But then you'd go somewhere remote, and they'd be stoked to see you and show you around the unit behind the venue, and in the fridge is a carton of beer, and then they take you to the bar and there's food, and what time do you want the food to come out? And for a 20-something-year-old guy, it's like a profound experience. But one of those stories was touring to Alice Springs. We landed in Alice Springs Airport and we got picked up by the bar manager. Probably leave out his name, but he's your kind of the archetype of a country pub bar manager. Mm-hmm. A bit rough around the edges, but total heart of gold. Physically a big guy, but definitely intimidating for skinny jean wearing indie kids.
And by the way, we're dressed exactly the same today.
Fine Chelsea chinos, they're served.
It's part of the memo for the episode. We must be dressed exactly the same way.
I know. I couldn't fold on that one.
But, sorry, please continue.
Yeah, physically intimidating guy to an indie band, and I could tell that because your voice goes down and you start trying to be one of the boys as soon as you meet. That's when I know that I'm uncomfortable. Is I'll drop my voice an octave. Yeah, lovely publican. He took us back to the pub, showed us around the accommodation, introduced us to all the bar staff. This is the band. Anything they want, put it on the tab. You have any problems, come see me. So we were there, we set up for the show, and I remember there was no stage. So it was just everything's on the dance floor. The band, the crowd, all the sound gear. It was a very hot night. So it's 30 degrees, Alice Springs. It's a mix of locals, hippies, vagrants, and a lot of backpackers, all just crammed into this kind of small band room. The show was chaos, like people falling over the fold-back monitors, people like trying to grab the mic off me. We're breaking up fights mid-set. It was just total ruckus kind of show, but super fun, and we did a really good job. Like, we were absolute nobodies, but we knew how to work a crowd and we knew how to build an energy. So yeah, it went really well, and by the time it finished there was a decent mood happening, and we thought let's get stuck into this bar tab. So round of jugs, which turned into a round of spirits, and it turned into a round of cocktails, and we're thinking, how good is this country hospitality? Like, these country folk are just so hospitable, and so we're buying shots for the bartenders, and we had some fans come along, so they're getting drinks as well. And what we didn't realise is that before the bar owner went home to crush rocks or do bicep curls or whatever country people do, he was supposed to cut off the bar tab. So he was supposed to wrap it up, but he forgot that. So by the time kind of last drinks came, everyone had a thick buzz on it. The bar staff, everyone was kind of wasted, and it was at his expense. And one of the bar guys invited us to a kick on at his place. So we all kicked on except for Alistair, the drummer. He acquired a bicycle, no lights, and just rode out into the middle of the desert. At least half an hour out into the middle of nowhere. By the time he sobered up, he got far enough, he looks back and Alice Springs is just this tiny kind of glow on the horizon. And so he decides to comes back to town and he makes it back to town, but by the time he gets back, it's all shut up. We've been wasted and we've gone to bed. There's a big steel gate pulled across the entryway, and the place we were staying was almost like a compound, this 2-story concrete building. Now, no one has the balls to wake up the pub owner, so he is a horticulturist by trade. He shimmies up this tree across this corrugated iron roof, goes to shimmy down another tree on the inside of the compound, and branch snaps, brings down every single branch along the way. He collects up all the branches, brings it inside, and he actually tucks it into bed with me. So the next day, I wake up and I'm inside a rainforest, inside a bunk bed, inside a backpackers in Alice Springs. Extreme hangover, very confused. And as I kind of woke up, I heard this banging on the door. What have you done? What have you done?
It's a scary guy.
And very scary.
Yeah.
And I remember that the banging was in time with his words. So he'd say, what have you done?
Yeah.
And we were all in the same room, petrified. Like, no one wanted to get up and face the music. Yeah, we managed to avoid him all day until the end of the day. We were heading to a show to do a DJ thing at the casino or nightclub there. We made it through the car park, and then his Land Rover pulled into the car park and he boxed us in. And there was nothing we could do but kind of face him. And
what happened? What did he yell at you?
He's
obviously pissed off.
Can I swear on this show?
Yeah.
Or?
Yes.
Okay, yes. No, he just called us tiki cunts. He took it really well. Yeah,
That's a great outcome.
Yeah, it was. So
I thought he was going to kill somebody.
Yeah,
like,
me too.
Someone rode out into the night.
I know.
And died.
It's some Wolf Creek kind of scenario. But yeah, no, he was very good about it. I think it was a good night. They had a big night of trade. So we definitely put a sizable dent in that guy's profit.
Wow.
And sorry about that. Sorry, not sorry. No,
To the gentleman listening,
I'm not
Tom
saying
is
his
sorry.
Definitely not saying his name.
That's okay.
It was a definitely memorable wild time. There's more, but it's definitely some of it. You have to be there.
That's okay, of course. Thank you for sharing that one.
Cool.
You made a comment in there that I do want to open up a little bit more, because I'm one of the people who's seen you perform over the 4.5 years at the Flying Cock, and something that you guys do is hold a crowd very well. So I'd like to ask you about that skill. How do you develop that skill to be able to hold the room?
I have developed it through playing heaps. Yeah, just played in originals bands, and that meant playing to empty rooms for the first 5 years of doing what I do. And that forces you just to get up and do it. You're performing, you're doing your thing when there's no one there. And so when there's people there, you've got something to feed back on. And yeah, that's definitely helped me, is playing to no one has helped me be able to play to people. There's definitely an art to it. It's almost like hyper engagement. You're trying to absorb as much of their attention as possible. Look at me. It's definitely a skill. Yeah, you've eventually developed somewhat of a fearlessness, but I still do get nervous, even playing in the regular residencies. There's some nights where you want to do a good job, and there's a make or break moment. Once you get up and people look at you, you'll either do well or you'll kook it. That deciding moment is super exciting. That's always a buzz.
Because, I mean, the psychological response to animals looking at you is that they're going to eat you, right? And, I mean, obviously the people in the crowd aren't going to eat you, but that's why people have this, hopefully not. That's why we have this fear of public speaking and performing and whatnot. And sort of what I'd like to pull apart there is, you believe then performing to an empty room has helped you when the room is full. Is it that it's more, I guess, open or honestly creative when you're on your own?
I think it's when you have a room full of people that don't care. Like, one of my favorite experiences is to have a hostile room that you'll play to. They don't give a shit. They're indifferent. You're the background noise, but then you can slowly win them over, and that requires you to pretend like you're having the best time. You're having to pretend like they are enjoying it. And there's some trick in that where, as you perform to them as if they're having a good time, they are forced to have a good time, and there's no decision in it. And I think playing to an empty room is very similar to playing to a full room. Mind you, if you have a full room and no one claps after the song, it's a lot more brutal than playing to an empty room and, no one claps, which both of those have happened like almost on the regs. So yeah, the feeling you get from both is very comparable, I guess.
Yes. So obviously listeners have heard a little bit about your experience, but tell us more about what you do and what you're building at the moment.
So yeah, a big part of my musical journey now is in the covers world. And that boils it down to exactly what it is. It's entertainment. You're giving people songs that they want to hear. And we've been fortunate enough to put ourselves, and I say ours, the main project I'm working with is Birdman, Randy, and the Ivory Street Preachers. We've positioned ourselves in this funny place where we get booked for kind of young, hip crowds, people with good taste in music. So we mercifully don't get bombarded with all that, like, play SK son, give us some Daryl Braithwaite horses. Don't get me wrong, it definitely happens, almost every night. But for the most part, we're expected to play hip songs and keep this kind of fresh repertoire of material coming over. And so my music time throughout the week is kind of split between doing a little bit of writing and learning new lyrics, learning new songs, trying to figure out what kids are into these days, which is always a struggle. It's a job, that's a big part of the job, is the behind the scenes, learning the lyrics, memorizing the lyrics.
On that, keeping up with what people are interested in, that's something that I've noticed, because before I knew you, I used to come in and listen to the band, because I would be there every Friday, Saturday night. And I noticed that pretty much when a good new popular song came out, you guys would be already on it.
Yeah.
So how do you stay on the pulse of that?
It's a lot of trial and error. So there are some strange formulas that work. Like you keep an eye on what's happening at Triple J, but that's not always going to work in a particular bar. One thing that is universal is that if a song is in a meme, it always works and it hangs around for ages. Drake, Bag Raiders, Shooting Stars, they're kind of referenced in memes, and for some reason they get the second or third wind. Daryl Braithwaite horses, that's an enigma. There's a riddle inside enigma all in itself.
Wrapped in a mystery.
It's I don't
maintain
fully
the
understand the cultural reasoning behind that, but yeah, we trial and error as well. Like we add songs, like for example last week we added Mac Miller Self-Care into the repertoire, and it's a hip-hop song. It's an awesome song, I love it, but we played it and it bombed, and I've just spent the week learning 3 verses of hip-hop lyrics, and
they're hard to learn.
They're really hard. There's a lot of words, and so you got it all in your brain for this 1 week, and you just have to discard it because it'll be there in the bank, but we kind of picked wrong, and that's the song that I like, not what other people like, and so that gets then shelved, and we add a new song in this week and see how that goes. So because we're getting that turnover of material, you just find out what works, and some songs are universal. Some songs will work with an old crowd and a young crowd. They're just silver bullets.
What are your silver bullets?
Silver bullets are, and I just said it, but Daryl Braithwaite horses, for some reason, just people get around that. And I don't actually, maybe someone can explain to me.
I'd love to hear anyone listening.
Yeah, hit me up on Instagram or something. It's Birdman Randy. And I'd love to get some 2 cents or some theories. But, you've got these old rockers that love it, and then millennials and people that didn't have any reference point to Daryl Braithwaite are coming up to you being like, play some Daryl Braithwaite. And for some, I don't understand that. But it's always Silver Bullet, John Farnham, You're the Voice, those pub bangers, 24 Karat Magic, any Bruno Mars is.
Why? So they're not in memes.
Yep.
But why is that? Is it just because of their popularity as people or musicians, or is the music technically good, or what's your opinion?
I think it's a combination of cultural saturation, so it's pop and it's saturated into enough people's worlds that they are familiar with it, and then but maybe not too much. It's maybe songs that are both on commercial radio and Triple J. Yeah, that's often a good formula as well, because they're cool enough that indie kids are listening to it, but then they're popular enough that it's on Nova or something like that.
I noticed before you said that you added it to your repertoire. You didn't say set list. So do you guys just have a bunch of songs that you then choose from?
Yeah.
I totally think that is a way better way to perform than a set list, because you can read what the crowd's feeling at that time.
For sure, yeah. We'll have a script when we get up there, we'll have a set list, but then if you guess wrong sometimes, and it's really hard to pick, and you definitely have to match the mood. A big one that we do is we will have a lot of pub rock classics that we try and stay away from unless it's really pumping, because there is a formula that you have to follow, and it's a universal formula that you need to get the girls on the dance floor because then the guys follow. And so if you're playing these kind of pubby get up kind of John Farnham type songs that are semi-ironic but also super fun to play and super fun to sing along to, if you pull them out too early, then it turns the vibe into this masculine thing. One interesting one is Eagle Rock. We try and avoid it because it's like a lawsuit waiting to happen. Everyone's pants go down, and yeah, it's such a strange vibe.
I mean, we might have to explain that to listeners that aren't familiar with what happens during Eagle Rock.
Yeah, is that a Queensland thing?
From what I've heard, it actually originated at UQ. I may be totally wrong though.
I'd be very interested to know if it happens in other states. But yeah, when a band or Eagle Rock by Daddy Cool comes on, there is a tradition where all the men in the audience will pull down their pants and dance around shuffle around kind of on the dance floor with their pants around their ankles. And it just happens. It's consistent as clockwork, and it's such a strange vibe. It's such a strange experience to play it, and you know it's coming, and then it comes, and then you just dicks out for the boys, dicks out for Harambe. And some guys like they haven't quite got their underwear selection, but you can always...
They weren't prepared.
They weren't prepared, and I can always make plenty of jokes about how the air conditioning is really cold in here, and it's fodder for some backhanded compliments.
Yeah, it is a very interesting experience, but I'm going to crack on with a totally different direction.
Please do.
What innovations have you seen in the music industry in your time in it?
There's been a huge innovation of the ability to get your music out there. It's only in the last 5 years we've seen all the record companies fall away, and so all of a sudden you don't have gatekeepers in between you writing and recording a song by yourself and then getting it out there to the entire world. It can be done with very little equipment, a basic recording setup. The DAWs, the recording software, are so good now that Ableton Live, or even just the ones that come with the MacBook, are just better than anything we've ever experienced. And so if you got the know-how, if you got the smarts to create a great song, we're in a better time now than ever to get that out there. Just because you have a good song doesn't necessarily mean that it will be popular, and there's a lot of other factors there. But yeah, that evolution in our ability to get songs out to people has really shifted. And in the live world, like live performance, and even in pubs culturally in Australia, I've seen through the last 10 years, maybe 9 years, shift from DJs to live bands. I really get the feeling that we are living in this kind of golden era of pubs having bands and clubs having live acts. That was a big thing in the 80s, and then there was a big boom with DJs, and I think I caught the transition of that, where I was being booked to play trumpet with DJs, a couple times a weekend, and there was a huge move to have an instrumentalist with a DJ, which is crazy because you don't need that. There's no reason to, but they book you, so you go along. And then it just suddenly kind of transitioned to, there were just a lot of live music bars opened up in Brisbane. I mean, more than the kind of ones that wanted kind of entertainment, the covers kind of stuff. And now you walk around the valley, every second bar has a live band. And that's so unique. I mean, I think Brisbane is doing really well. It punches above its weight for live music and bands and stuff like that. But also Australia culturally is so unique for having live music, and punters appreciating that, because it's not like that. Even like the biggest cities, in Berlin, there's no real indie band scene to speak of, or real cover scenes. And it's interesting to know that living in a kind of golden era. Or that's how I feel, at least.
What changes do you want to see take place in the industry?
I think everyone's always got gripes about being paid on time, and that's warranted. Like chasing money that you've played a gig 2 months ago and they still haven't paid up. I think everyone has a hard time with cash flow, but I feel like musicians probably cop the rough end of the stick more often than not. And I think there are changes in, like, from a governmental level about paying contractors on time. I think if people could get paid quicker, it would make everyone's lives a bit easier.
Do you believe there's a way for that to happen, or do you have any solutions to that problem?
I think it's got to come from the top. I've played very, very sad gigs for major shopping centres, and they've got 60-day terms, and so they don't pay any contractor for 60 days. And that's ridiculous. There's no reason for that other than them being difficult.
For their cash flow.
Yeah, I guess for their cash flow, but they're also a shopping centre. They get a monthly rent. It's so consistent. And so I think there are changes coming from a governmental level about what is best practice. But then those rules always go out the window in the entertainment industry. It's really, if you're good and if you can pull a crowd, then you survive. And you get looked after if you can fill the room and keep people in there, which is what I focus on doing.
I want to approach that same question from earlier in a different way. So when the room does fill and you have to read the crowd, how do you learn what people want to hear next?
It is a little bit ephemeral, or there's, something in the air tonight. Oh Lord. You really get it from, like, there's a lot of eye contact. The difference between, you know when you're firing because you look out and there's a sea of people, but for every person there's two eyes on you and it shoots electricity in you. You definitely get the sense when you know you're doing well. And conversely, if there's a room full of people and no one's looking at you, everyone's doing their thing, which is perfectly fine, but you definitely know that you're not capturing their attention. So that's an element to it. And I think you can kind of read how loose people are. If everyone's really messy, they will want to hear the classics, and you don't want to go near anything vaguely hip or cool or anything you like. You just kind of stick to the script. Also, you can kind of read the demographic, old, young. We played Brookfield show, so it's like a rodeo. Everyone's wearing cowboy hats and bunnies, and so it's onto the country stuff. And so yeah, you can read in that sense, and also trial and error. If someone likes something, they'll let you know, but if they don't like something, they're not going to give you any charity claps.
So does that mean picking the next track, because you've got this repertoire, if they like something they've heard and you see that they like it, playing something similar? What about changing, what if you want to change speed a little bit or, change tempo and you want it to...
Thing. It's similar to DJing where you want to start with slower tracks and build up to the higher energy stuff. And it is good to have that kind of slow progression. But you can, take dips and turns and there's no real rules to it. But if you pull out a slow song when it's the middle of a kind of peak period, you'll lose the crowd, and you can definitely tell. You fucked up, and they'll tell you. They will definitely tell you in one way or another.
What about your creative process? So when you're writing, how do you get into a mental state to create?
Being in a space is really good. So something like this, where you're away from distractions, it's very hard, but I'll put my phone on flight mode, which it's crazy how difficult that is, and how many excuses you'll make in your head to justify why you shouldn't put your phone on flight mode. But really, you can answer your text in 40 minutes and no one's going to care. But just trying to disconnect and then looping. I write songs through melody first and then the lyrics kind of phonetically fall into place and hopefully there's some meaning in there. But it will just be kind of looping a feel or a section and slowly slotting all the bits into place. It never really happens too quickly for me. It's a drip feeding kind of process.
But then to get into that state of mind, to allow yourself to be receptive to anything, how do you induce that?
It's definitely possible. I'm a big believer in input and output. So if you fill your eyes with beautiful things, fill your ears with beautiful things, your mouth and your nose, and have this sensory input, then I think that fuels this kind of creative thing inside of you. One big thing is I'm a huge fan of podcasts, but I feel like when I listen to only podcasts and no music, that has some effect on my ability to write. Like, you're listening to people speak and their opinions and stuff, and it's valuable and you learn, but yeah, there's something lacking in that. So then you switch to kind of
just
new music. Yeah, and then you kind of feel the tank fill back up. But it also works with, going to an art gallery or just trying to be present when you're walking through a park or something like that you can fill that tank back up.
I've noticed that a lot of creative minds are very present. It is that sort of presence, this awareness of beauty and just immersion in that, right? But other people don't seem to see these things. So then how do you make someone else aware of the beauty in everything?
Yeah, that's a very good point, that there's an audience in art and you need to make them understand what you're feeling. If you write a song and it's exactly what you feel, but it doesn't communicate those feelings to the audience, then it's not doing its job. It is purely subjective, person by person, but the audience is not removed from the creative process. And that's a bit of a minefield because you're writing a song to be listened to by other people, but you're trying not to write for them. You're knowing that it will be heard by other people, but you don't want it to be written exclusively for Triple J. You make a decision because people are going to be into this. It's got to come from somewhere internal.
It's interesting hearing that because I'm about to start reading Oscar Wilde's Picture of Dorian Gray, and I started it, and in the preface he has this short piece. In there he says that any piece of art is a reflection of the artist, which is, some of us may have heard before, but the point that I think I'm drawing from what you just said is that if you create something for something else, it's not a reflection of you anymore, it's something else.
Yes.
So it has to be you.
That is true. The best songs are honest. The best lyrics come from a very honest place. But they can also be manufactured, and the artist is aware of the audience interpreting them. So it's a bit of a minefield where I want to write a song about whatever, say being addicted to prostitutes or something like that, knowing that the audience will then think that that's about me, or even just making a bold Kanye West style claim that then the audience, you're aware that the audience is then going to. So how do you not let that affect that pure creative, I guess it's trying to block that out as much as possible and write for yourself and write a lot.
Yes. What's your biggest challenge right now?
Trying to make the main thing the main thing, because the main thing is to make the main thing the main thing. And as you kind of get a little bit older, your life gets filled up with more and more shit. A lot of that shit is not important, and so you're trying to navigate, find the essence of what you want in your life and only focus on that shit. But there is a kind of anecdote, or there's a comparison that someone once told me that was, we're told to eat our vegetables first. You got your meal on the plate and your parents say eat your veggies first, but in our lives the pile of vegetables is insurmountable. Like, you'll never get to the bottom, so there's a point where you need to stop eating the vegetables and just go for the ice cream.
I like that.
And I'm trying to figure out how to do that. The best artists I know are all degenerates because they only eat ice cream for breakfast. They forget about doing your taxes and all that, and they only focus on the purest stuff. I wouldn't trade places with half of them, but there's something in that I'm trying to figure out. How do you find the right balance of important stuff?
Is it just balancing the important stuff, or is it also identifying what's important and the rebalancing of what's important?
Identifying is a huge thing because we're a big cloud of emotions. I want everything all at once. I want what I've got. I also want what you've got. How do you identify it? And what was the other part you mentioned?
Rebalance what is important, because what becomes important changes.
That's true. Yeah, very true.
I like thinking about these things.
I love it.
It's been a very interesting episode. I just have one more question for you today, Tom. Who would you like to hear on the show?
I'd like to hear Dave Flynn. Dave Flynn is the owner and manager of the Flying Cock, as well as a bunch of other restaurants. I know him very well, and he's one of the loveliest guys I know, and really good for a yarn, and probably really relevant to a hospo crowd. He would have some pearls of wisdom for you, so if you can get Flinny on the show, you'll have a good one.
He's a fantastic guy. I'll definitely have a chat with him after.
Put it to him.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for being on the show today, Tom. It's been amazing having you on.
Thank you.
The show today was produced by Angus Brennan. If you'd like to know more about hospopreneurs, for advice, insights, and extra content, find us at hospopreneurs.com. Thanks for listening.